Welcome to First Sleep Aid, calm stories to help you unwind, learn, and fall asleep. From true crime to curious facts and thoughtful ideas, always softly spoken. Subscribe now and take a deep breath. You're in good hands.
Welcome. Today we're doing a deep dive into a truly unsettling story, the life, the crimes of Jeffrey Dahmer.
It's a difficult subject, absolutely.
And we really want to be clear, our goal isn't sensationalism. It's about trying to understand the context, the complexities, and, most importantly, remembering the victims.
Yes, centering their memory is vital. We need to look beyond just the headlines, explore the individual factors, maybe the societal dynamics too.
So let's start at the beginning. Not with chaos, but quiet suburbia.
Mm-hmm.
Think Bath, Ohio, the
Mhm.
1960s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A pretty standard middle-class area. And there's the Dahmer home on Ridge Road.
Mm-hmm.
Lionel, the dad, a research chemist. Joyce, the mom, dealing privately with her own mental health issues.
Right. From the outside, you might not suspect anything unusual, maybe even peaceful.
Exactly. But inside those walls,
Mm.
there was this unspoken tension, emotional distance. It's that contrast, isn't it? The outside versus the inside.
That setting is so crucial, that juxtaposition, the normal exterior, the struggles within. It sets the stage for, well, for Jeffrey's early detachment.
Yeah, it wasn't loud arguments necessarily, but this
Mm.
quiet, this lack of real emotional connection.
And it's in those subtle gaps, isn't it? That's where vulnerabilities can start to form.
And Jeffrey, even from a really young age, started to pull back. His father, Lionel, he noticed it, a kind of remoteness,
Uh-huh.
not seeking comfort like you'd expect a kid to, not much eye contact. It wasn't big emotional displays, just a quiet withdrawal.
Like receding into himself.
Yeah. While other kids are asking for attention or showing what they need, he just seemed to fade back. What did that early withdrawal usually suggest?
Well, it can be significant. It doesn't always lead to, extreme outcomes, but it can indicate a real difficulty connecting emotionally. Maybe an inability to tune into the family's emotional frequency.
The absence of those expected behaviors.
Yeah.
It's subtle, but maybe quite profound.
It can be, yes. A sign that something in development isn't quite typical.
Later, the family moves.
Hmm.
Bigger house, near more woods. And this is when Jeffrey's fascination really takes a turn. Not with live animals, but their remains.
The bones.
Collecting them from the woods. Raccoons, chipmunks, bits of fur, skeletons. He kept them in jars, cleaned them secretly.
And using acid, wasn't it, from his father's chemistry set?
Yes, to get the tissue off. It just wasn't a typical kid's nature collection, was it?
No, not at all. And the focus is specific on what's left, what's still powerless in a way.
And using the chemistry set, it feels almost methodical, scientific, even at that age.
It does. It wasn't just picking things up. It was this active engagement with decomposition, looking under the surface of life.
And Lionel, his father, he actually encouraged it at first.
Mm-hmm. He saw it as maybe scientific curiosity.
Yeah, something they could share.
Yeah.
Potential interest. He even showed Jeffrey how to bleach the bones, explain decomposition.
So they bonded over this slightly macabre hobby.
Right. But looking back, you have to wonder, did that encouragement, even though it was well-intentioned, kind of validate something
Mm-hmm.
darker?
It's a fair question. It likely did, inadvertently. It shows how easy it is to misinterpret early signs, right? Especially when you're hoping for a connection, a shared interest. You might normalize something unusual.
Yeah, you focus on the potential positive, not the underlying motivation.
Exactly.
By middle school, he was becoming, well, almost invisible, described as a ghost in the hallways.
Socially isolated.
Very. Started drinking. And then this really disturbing bid for attention, mimicking
Yeah.
epileptic seizures.
For laughs, wasn't
Yeah.
that?
Just a deeply unsettling way to interact. But the source says underneath that weirdness, there was a deeper fracture, a hollowing out.
Mm.
What does that suggest to you?
It speaks to a profound internal disconnect, I think. The outward stuff, the drinking, the fake seizures, those are attempts, however strange, to engage.
That they were masking something.
Exactly. A deeper emotional void, a real lack of connection, maybe growing alienation. His inner world was just drifting further away from everyone else's.
And then puberty hits. And his internal world shifts again in a really disturbing way.
The fantasies emerge.
Yes. Attraction to male bodies, but completely stripped of any romance or emotion. It was tied up with domination, fantasies of people unconscious, paralyzed.
Present, but with no agency.
Right. He didn't want a relationship. He wanted possession, complete control. And early on, these thoughts even involved corpses, That's a major deviation, surely.
Oh, absolutely. Those specific fantasies, power, lack of agency, non-consensual scenarios, even death that's deeply concerning, it shows a profound lack of empathy.
The ability to understand or share what someone else is feeling.
Completely absent, it seems. The focus is purely on control, not connection. That's
Huh.
critical here.
And what's so disturbing is that people around him, they didn't seem to see how serious it was getting.
Right. Teachers thought he was unmotivated, maybe, but smart.
Friends or acquaintances really just thought he was odd,
Hmm.
harmless, basically.
And even a school counselor, after just one meeting, described him as, what was it? Emotionally distant, but not alarming.
How? How could these warning signs just be missed consistently?
It's a huge challenge, isn't it? Often, people struggling internally like this, they don't always present in ways that scream danger.
You mean it's not always obvious?
Right. There's a tendency to rationalize odd behavior. Or maybe the people around him just didn't have the training to spot the subtler signs of really deep psychological distress.
And maybe also societal discomfort. People don't want to think about really dark possibilities.
That plays a role too, certainly.
The source mentions a few possibilities. This fog around him, making him hard to read. The idea that maybe people subconsciously didn't want to see.
Or didn't have the psychological tools or understanding back then.
Or, and this is chilling, maybe Jeffrey himself was already learning to hide it, developing a kind of camouflage.
That's a very real possibility, masking the darkness. It's disturbing to think how early that might start.
All those factors probably played a part. The tendency to look away from uncomfortable truths, especially if they're subtle.
And without clear behaviors that fit known patterns of danger, it's incredibly hard to see past the surface. And yeah, that camouflage, the ability to seem normal while hiding inner turmoil, that's
Oh.
often a characteristic of people who go on to do terrible things.
When that started for him, that's a key question.
It is.
So this first part of our dive, it ends with his high school graduation, 1978. Even that has a weird, dark footnote.
The yearbook photo.
Yeah, defaced, his name scratched out by the editors. Just a small thing, but it speaks volumes about his alienation, doesn't it?
Coton symbol, yes.
But by then, his internal world, it had already changed catastrophically. The source sums it up so chillingly. The shadows had grown teeth, and soon they would find flesh.
That's powerful and deeply ominous. It marks that shift, doesn't it? From fantasy, however dark, to the potential for real-world horror.
Graduation wasn't a hopeful start to adulthood for him. It was something much darker brewing.
A point where those internal struggles are just tragically poised to explode outwards.
Moving into the mid-70s now, the atmosphere at the Dahmer house just kept getting worse.
The family dynamic deteriorating.
Right. Joyce, his mother, her mental health struggles really intensified. Deep depression, medication, even hallucinations, mood swings.
While Lionel, the father, retreated.
Yeah, into work. His dissertation, long hours at the lab, just withdrew. It sounds like a family under immense pressure.
It really does. A family unit under severe strain, Joyce's struggles, Lionel's withdrawal. It created this environment of, well, profound emotional neglect for Jeffrey, even if unintended,
Both parents were just consumed by their own problems.
leaving very little emotional energy to notice or deal with what was happening with their son. It's a tragic situation where everyone's individual struggles just made the whole family system worse.
And Jeffrey, in the middle of all this dysfunction, he stayed quiet, more isolated.
Mm-hmm.
And the source points out there were no interventions, no therapy, no real talks about how he was feeling, what he was struggling with.
An insidious kind of neglect. Not necessarily malice, like you said, but just oversight, because the parents were overwhelmed.
That lack of attention, though, during those critical teenage years must have had a huge impact.
Oh, absolutely. Neglect isn't always obvious abuse. Often it's the absence of things, emotional support, guidance, connection, especially during adolescence.
So in a family already in crisis, his internal turmoil just got missed, or maybe minimized, seen as typical teenage stuff.
Very possibly. And without that supportive, communicative environment, those deep-seated issues just festered, intensified.
And it was during this turbulent time that his obsessions really started to solidify and escalate.
The fantasies becoming more concrete.
Yeah, focusing on male joggers.
Yeah.
That desire for absolute control, possession, no resistance possible.
Chilling.
And there's that incident. He actually hid in the bushes near their house with a baseball bat,
Yeah.
waiting for a specific jogger.
He was planning to act.
Yes, the jogger never showed up that day, but it was a near miss. A terrifying escalation from thought to, well, planned action.
That's a huge warning sign, isn't it? A glimpse into the intensity of the urges and his willingness to cross that line into the real world. The weapon, lying in wait. The line between fantasy and reality was getting dangerously thin.
His interest in anatomy also got darker around then.
Moving beyond just the bones.
Right. Private dissections of small animals. And the source says his motivation shifted. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was this: hunger for possession. The lines blurring between animal and human in his mind.
That suggests a deepening detachment, doesn't it, from the value of life itself?
Yeah, progressing from looking at skeletons to actively dissecting animals. It's a step towards objectification, seeing bodies as things to be controlled, examined, not living beings.
A significant step towards dehumanizing others, yeah.
By 17, his isolation was almost total. Drinking heavily, grades tanked.
And his parents separated.
Right. They both moved out eventually,
Yeah.
leaving him increasingly alone in the house. The source really stresses this: no supervision, no structure, no comfort during such a critical time.
Just a vacuum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A vacuum where these compulsions could just bloom, unchecked.
Yeah.
Way beyond fantasy now. That lack of any support system then, it's staggering.
That period of near total abandonment, maybe not intentionally malicious, but it gave him the perfect opportunity, didn't it? For those urges to take over completely, no constraints, no guidance.
The pre-existing issues, the obsessions, the isolation.
Yeah.
It was a tragically perfect storm, allowing the inner demons to take control.
Yeah.
And then, June 1978, the encounter with Stephen Hicks.
The first victim.
Jeffrey's just driving around aimlessly, drunk, mind probably full of those dark thoughts. He sees Stephen Hicks, 19, hitchhiking, guitar.
The type he'd been fantasizing about.
Exactly. And he offers him a ride, invites him back to that empty, isolated house for beers. A seemingly random meeting, but it set everything off.
That was the catalyst, wasn't it? That pushed him from fantasy into the horrific reality of murder. Stephen Hicks became the physical target for all those years of festering violence. The offer of a ride, the casual invitation, seemingly small steps, but fueled by impulse and dark fantasy.
At the house, apparently things were normal at first. Drinking, talking, music. But then Stephen said he had to leave. And something just broke in Jeffrey. The idea of him leaving, escaping his control. He couldn't handle it.
Impulse took over.
Brutal impulse.
Yeah.
Struck him from behind with a dumbbell, then strangled him.
And the aftermath. His own description.
Yeah, the source highlights this chilling lack of reaction. No horror, no elation, just stillness. That sudden, terrifying switch from fantasy to the irreversible act. That lack of emotion is deeply unsettling.
Profoundly disturbing. It suggests such a detachment from the gravity of it all. Like he was just acting out a script he'd rehearsed in his head for years. Not the normal shock or remorse or fear you'd expect.
It speaks to how much those fantasies had already desensitized him, right? To the value of life, the reality of violence.
Completely.
And for what followed the murder?
Yeah.
It was so methodical. Gruesome, but methodical.
A process afterward.
Stripping the body, examining it, the dissection in the basement the next day, separating flesh from bone, using acid, burying and hiding the remains.
Calculated.
And the source notes this chilling detail. His excitement wasn't really from the killing itself. It was from the power, the control, having a body that couldn't leave him.
That gets right to the core of it, doesn't it? That overwhelming need for absolute control, objectifying people completely.
The dismemberment, the disposal. It wasn't just about hiding the crime.
No, it was about total domination, even in death. His motivation was possession, not connection.
And tragically, Stephen Hicks just vanished. No link back to Jeffrey was made then.
No evidence, no witnesses.
13 years. 13 years before anyone knew what happened to him. And in that time, Jeffrey made these superficial attempts at a normal life, trying to quiet those urges that were now real.
That's a long time for something so horrific to stay hidden. It shows his ability to just blend in. And maybe the reality that back then a missing hitchhiker didn't always spark a massive investigation.
A combination of his deception and perhaps societal issues, too.
Likely, yes.
The source mentions his attempts to fit in college at Ohio State, the Army, time in Germany, Florida.
But it didn't work.
No. The darkness was still there. His Army time was apparently marked by allegations, drugging, sexually assaulting other soldiers.
Suggesting that need for control, for violation, it never went away.
Those attempts at a normal life, they were doomed because the root issues weren't being addressed. The Army incidents show the pattern was still there, just waiting.
Exactly.
Eventually, he ends up back in Wisconsin, living with his grandmother in West Allis.
And for a while, it looked stable.
On the surface, yeah. Went to church, helped around the house. But underneath, He was still going to gay bars, spiking drinks.
Ominous signs, foreshadowing the return to violence.
It's chilling how well he could put on that normal facade.
He got good at it, didn't he? Mimicking normalcy. Fooled people, even his grandmother who meant well, while secretly engaging in behavior that was escalating again. It shows how hard it is to see beneath that surface.
And then, November 1987, almost 10 years after Stephen Hicks, the second killing, Stephen Tuomi.
Met at a bar, went to a hotel.
And Tuomi ends up dead. Dahmer claimed he couldn't remember the actual killing.
Amnesia. Convenient.
Highly convenient, yeah. But then he methodically gets rid of the body. Suitcase. Dismemberment back at his grandmother's house.
Which suggests he knew exactly what he'd done. The deliberate disposal contradicts any claim of memory loss. It was a calculated cover-up.
A terrifying return to violence.
Yeah.
And establishing that pattern of disposal.
And after Tuomi, the pace picked up.
Horrifyingly so. Between 87 and 88, James Dockstader, Richard Guerrero, lured with false promises, drugged, strangled, dismembered.
And this is when he started keeping trophies.
The skulls. He called them anchors. Grim physical proof of his control, his permanent possession.
That's a deeply disturbing escalation, memorializing the violence, solidifying that twisted sense of power.
His grandmother started getting suspicious, right? Strange things, bad smells.
She eventually asked him to leave, so his behavior was becoming noticeable, even if the full horror wasn't grasped.
In 1990, he gets his own place. Apartment 213, Oxford Apartments in Milwaukee.
And that privacy...
It was the final element, wasn't it? It allowed everything to escalate, completely unchecked. A chilling pattern emerged.
Meeting victims, often young men of color, marginalized.
Using sedatives, strangulation, then the photography, dismemberment, preserving remains. That apartment became the crucial enabler.
The isolation was key. And his targeting of vulnerable individuals, that's predatory, exploiting societal indifference. The fact that disappearances from those communities often get less attention. It's tragic.
And the source details these horrific experiments, trying to create zombies.
Unbelievable. Drilling holes in skulls, injecting chemicals, boiling water.
A depraved, grotesque attempt to create permanent, submissive companions. Utterly futile but caused unbelievable agony. It shows such coldness, methodical cruelty.
It goes way beyond violence. It's the depth of the psychological disturbance. Complete dehumanization. Trying to achieve absolute control even beyond death. A twisted way to fight his fear of loneliness, of abandonment, through ultimate domination.
He also preserved body parts. Consumed flesh, painted skulls, made that bone shrine in the apartment, his own personal mausoleum. The depravity is just staggering.
The creation of the shrine, the cannibalism, it shows a total breakdown of morality, of empathy.
The apartment itself, described as a geometry of horror, everything placed deliberately. The acid barrel, the freezer contents, the Polaroids, the tools, even a skull on the fridge.
An order within the chaos, reflecting that terrifying internal world made real.
His idea for a power center in the closet. It emphasizes how private, how ritualistic it all was. A space dedicated to these unspeakable acts.
It wasn't random. It was disturbingly planned. The normalization of the unimaginable right there in his apartment.
Between 1990 and 91, 11 more men vanished, murdered in that apartment.
And the source names them. It's crucial to remember they weren't just statistics.
No, individuals, lives, stories, often marginalized, which he exploited. Families raised concerns, but were dismissed.
And the Conorak synthesomphone case returned to Dahmer by police after he escaped.
Heartbreaking. It just starkly highlights the systemic failures, the biases that let it continue. So many missed opportunities.
The fact that disappearances, especially from marginalized communities, went unnoticed or were met with indifference, it's a damning indictment. Conorak's case is just horrific proof of how prejudice and system failures can be fatal, directly contributing to lost lives.
And all this time, Dahmer's keeping up appearances, working at the chocolate factory, seemingly normal routine.
While neighbors like Glenda Cleveland were calling the police repeatedly.
Concerns about noises, smells, seeing that young boy. But the warnings went unheeded. It speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really does. That contrasts the normal job, the secret horrors. His ability to compartmentalize was chilling, and the ignored warnings, a profound failure by the community, by law enforcement, to take those concerns seriously.
Summer of 91, the killings accelerated even more.
He'd mastered his methods.
Yeah, disturbingly adept at the procedures, the lies. Started using sick days from work for his rituals, preserving trophies.
And he later said he felt safe in that apartment.
Chilling. That twisted motivation, loneliness, fear of abandonment, leading to this violent desire for control, to stop people leaving. It's a deeply disturbing psychology.
That acceleration shows a pathology deepening, the compulsions taking over. Feeling safe in that place of horror, it reveals how warped his reality had become. Pathological attempts to fight isolation through ultimate control.
Then the source rightly shifts focus back to the victims, emphasizing they were erased but must not be forgotten.
Giving them back their humanity.
Briefly telling stories of people like Anthony Lee Sears, Conorak Synthesonphone, Tony Hughes, Curtis Straughter, their dreams, families, how they tragically crossed Dahmer's path, and listing all 17 names.
That's absolutely essential. Acknowledging their lives, the devastation their loss caused. Listing the names reclaims their identity, refuses to let them be just victims. It's about respect, remembrance.
Then, July 22nd, 1991, Tracy Edwards. The encounter in apartment 213.
A turning point.
That unsettling atmosphere, being handcuffed. Edwards' incredible calm under pressure. His escape, running to the police.
His bravery was undeniable.
It set off the chain of events that finally ended it all.
Edwards' courage, his quick thinking in that terrifying situation, that's what brought it all to light. His immediate action after escaping was crucial.
Officers Mueller and Rothenkamp arrive. Dahmer's initial cooperation, trying to bluff his way through.
Until they found the Polaroids.
And the remains. That horrifying moment of realization. The truth behind the apartment door.
The photos were irrefutable evidence, weren't they? Shattered any denial. Stark, brutal clarity for those officers.
The full search then revealed everything. The skulls, skeletons, freezer contents, severed heads, the acid barrel, preserved parts.
The sheer scale, the depravity.
The source emphasizes the shock, the horror. Unimaginable. A testament to the acts committed behind those ordinary walls is almost impossible to process.
It underscored the darkness hidden beneath that mundane surface. A scene that would scar the memories of everyone who witnessed it, a reminder of extreme human cruelty.
In the immediate aftermath, Dahmer confesses fully.
And the reaction in Milwaukee.
Rage, grief, and the questions. Why wasn't he stopped sooner? The focus immediately turned to the systemic failures. Law enforcement, society, demanding accountability.
Understandable outrage, grief, betrayal. Examining those failures was critical, looking at biases, the vulnerability of marginalized communities, the need for change.
His trial. He pleaded guilty by reason of insanity.
Which led to conflicting psychological evaluations.
Starkly different expert opinions. And the testimonies from the victims' families. So emotional. Unforgettable. Rita Isbell's outburst.
Powerful. Raw.
While Dahmer, through much of it, remained detached. Chillingly so. The impact on those families, immeasurable.
The trial was huge, emotionally charged, a platform for all that grief and anger, and the conflicting psych evaluations showed how complex legal insanity is, especially in cases like this.
The jury's verdict came back. Legally sane. Guilty.
15 consecutive life sentences. Wisconsin didn't have the death penalty.
So legal accountability, yes. But could it ever truly address the suffering?
The verdict showed the jury believed he knew what he was doing, knew it was wrong, despite his disturbed mind. Life in prison was the maximum. Brought some closure for some, maybe. But the pain for the families, that endures.
His time in prison started in protective isolation.
Understandable, given his crimes.
But he later asked to go into the general population, which turned out to be fatal. He apparently had a religious conversion in prison. Then, November 1994, just a few years after conviction, murdered by another inmate, Christopher Scarver.
A violent end.
The reactions from victims' families, complex.
Divided. Understandably so.
His murder brought varied reactions, didn't it?
No.
Finality for some, maybe no solace for others, perhaps reopened wounds. The religious conversion adds another layer. Questions of sincerity, remorse.
After his death, there's that legal fight over his brain.
Eventually incinerated.
Ashes divided, the apartment building demolished, his belongings destroyed, a societal attempt to just erase the physical remnants.
Like trying to physically remove the stain from history. These actions show that collective desire, right?
Right.
To erase the reminders of such profound evil.
Yep.
Demolishing the building, destroying his things. Symbolic relief, perhaps? But the impact, the lessons, they remain.
Absolutely.
So our deep dive ends here with this reflection on the systemic failures that let this happen for so long. Police failures, societal indifference, especially towards marginalized groups.
Yeah.
That cultural tendency to overlook warning signs from the fringes.
It's not just about one monster.
No. It's also about how easily we as a society can fail to see, fail to believe, how easily we can look away. Which leaves us with a final question for you listening. Are we watching now? Are we more aware, more vigilant, more willing to see and to believe.
That's the enduring legacy, isn't it? Examining those systemic failures, confronting our own biases, questioning our assumptions, considering how we must do better to protect the vulnerable, heed warnings, prevent such tragedies. That final question, it's powerful. It reminds us vigilance, empathy, justice, they're ongoing responsibilities for all of us.